Hey guys, since this week's theme is fun and games, we're going to show you some woodworking techniques which you can use to make your own custom game boards. Typically, we use these techniques to make things like cutting boards, but you can also make chess and checkers boards too. These cutting boards are made by taking strips of wood and then gluing them together, and then using a saw to clean up the excess around the edges. Using a technique like this, you could make a chess or checkerboard like this by taking alternating strips of light and dark wood, gluing those together, and then slicing them up, flipping every other one, gluing them back together, and that will give you some alternating light and dark pattern. If this is one of your first woodworking projects, chances are you'll have to go buy some lumber before you can start. But as you start doing more woodworking projects, you'll accumulate scrap wood and pieces that you didn't end up using. And we like to keep all that stuff because you can use it for other projects where you only need small pieces. So once you have your pieces picked out, we're going to need to cut them down so that they're the same width because the squares in the chessboard are all the same size. So table saws are one of the most dangerous woodworking tools out there, so make sure you have an adult who knows how to use this supervising you while you do the cut, or have them make the cut for you. For safety, I've got safety glasses here, and I've got a blade guard on that prevents kickback, which is the piece sliding back towards you when you're cutting. So we want to cut this darker piece of wood to the same width as this guy, and the way we're going to do that is by taking this and sticking it in between the fence and the blade, and then lining up the fence. You want to move the fence in and lock it down so that the piece of wood just barely grazes the teeth of the saw blade. Now we're going to set the height of the saw blade, and it's important to have at least 6 teeth in the wood at all times. So I'm just going to move this down a little bit. You don't really want the teeth to come all the way out of the top of the wood either. While it's not necessary for this cut, sometimes it's required to move the fence around with a lot of precision. We found it's useful to use playing cards as very accurate spacers because they're all about 1/100 of an inch thick. So by stacking up different numbers of them, you can get very repeatable thicknesses for spacers that you can use throughout your cuts. Sometimes you set the fence, you cut a piece of wood, and you realize it's a little bit too thick or a little too thin. So as an example, let's say we need to move the fence over in this direction 2/100 of an inch. I'm going to take 2 playing cards, that's 2/100 of an inch. I'm going to take a little block of wood and press them up against the fence. Now I'm going to remove the playing cards. So now there's a 2/100 of an inch gap between the fence and the block of wood. So now I'm going to unclamp my fence and just tap it very lightly so that it snugs up against the block of wood. So now we've accurately moved the fence over 2/100. Sometimes you need accuracy under 1/100 of an inch, and so we've found that using layers of masking tape helps there. About 3 layers of masking tape equals 1 playing card, and so by combining playing cards and layers of masking tape, you can get very, very fine measurements. Okay, so I've got the fence lined back up where it should be. I've got my dad here to help catch the wood as it goes off through the other side of the saw, and we're ready to cut. Alright, so now we're ready to glue this up. As you can see, we actually only have 4 pieces of wood that we're going to glue. This is because it's actually a little easier to manage 4 pieces of wood instead of 8 when you're gluing things up. And so what we're going to do is we're going to glue this up, and then we're going to cut it in half, and then this section will be able to go over here, and then that will be the square, the 8x8 square for the chessboard. So when you glue things up, they need to be clamped together while they dry. This piece in particular will need to be clamped along 2 axes. We'll need these longer clamps for clamping it in its direction, and that will really squeeze the joints together and make sure that all those surfaces are really tight. But it will also need clamps along this axis, because when you squeeze things really tight, they tend to want to buckle, and so these, the clamps that will go here, will keep all the pieces from springing out of place. So you'll notice that we have all these blocks here, which we call clamp blocks, that go between the clamp and the actual workpiece. And this is just to protect the surface. When you're applying a lot of force by really twisting down these clamps, this small metal pad kind of digs into the wood, And so we spread that pressure out using a block like this. However, since these are wood blocks, they will actually get glued to the workpiece if you're using wood glue. So what we've done is we've coated some in paper towels. So this just kind of peels off with the glue, it's okay. And the towels actually provide a little bit of extra padding. We've also found that masking tape works really well. It doesn't stick to the glue that much, and so you can just put down a couple layers of masking tape over your clamping blocks. And then when you put that face up against the glue, you can still apply a lot of pressure, and it spreads it out really nicely, and the glue does not bind the block to your piece. So to prep for your glue up, you're going to want to take some type of paper towels and rip them up into little pieces like this. And this will help with just wiping up excess glue as it comes off. You're also going to want to take your clamps and make sure they're opened up enough so that you can get them around the clamping blocks without having to unwind them a lot when the glue is actually on there and it's drying. Then you're going to want to get your glue. We like to use Titebond brand wood glue. This is Titebond 3. It dries really fast, which is good if you're doing a project that requires a lot of different gluing steps. The only thing about this is, since it does dry fast, you're going to have to make sure that you get your piece all clamped up in time before it sets up. So when you're gluing pieces together, you want to apply glue to both sides of every joint. So these guys right here will be glued along this joint, which means that we want to actually apply glue to both of these two faces. Once all the glue has been rubbed in, go ahead and line all your pieces up. And then before you clamp, wipe up a little bit of the excess glue. Now take the other rails here, clamping blocks, place them on, and Joe, if you can pick this side up.
All right.
I'm going to put this clamp on, just very, very loosely, just so that the clamp kind of stays on, but not very tight. Take our clamping blocks and these clamps, and we'll clamp them in this direction. So the glue has dried, and now we're just going to go ahead and take the clamps off. We're going to go ahead and cut this in half and then glue this piece on, and that will give us more or less a square shape. And then once that's dry, we'll cut slices out of it and flip every other one. So this is dry now. And now we're just going to cut off little chunks like this so that we can alternate them to create the chessboard pattern like that. In general, when you need to make a lot of different pieces that are all the same size, using the stop block technique is definitely a good way to go. We just finished cutting all the different chunks. We've flipped all the orientations here. And now, put them together, get a chessboard. We took the clamps off, we sanded it a little bit, and then we rubbed some Danish oil on it, and here is the finished product. I'm Sam.
I'm Joe, and we'll see you guys next week.